Hello, everyone, and welcome back to How to Heal, our podcast for the youth by the youth.
Today, Caitlin and I are bringing on a very special guest, Mr. Gridiron.
Hello, Mr. Gridiron, and welcome to the podcast.
How are you doing, Caitlin? Jacqueline, thank you so much for inviting me. So glad to be here.
Thank you for coming.
Of course. Okay, so today we'll be asking Mr. Gridiron a few questions to get to know him better and how he embodies heal. So our first question for you, Mr. Gridiron, is what position do you hold in the district office and how did you obtain your position?
Well, so I serve as the Administrator of Equity and Student Services for our district, and I know that's a lot of words, but just basically what that means is I have an opportunity to do for kids what was done for me, and that's basically creating opportunities and access to opportunities to help them reach their potential and really have an opportunity to work with adults to remove barriers that prevent kids from reaching their potential, whether that's internal barriers that are created through the education system, or whether that is barriers that are outside within their home or their community, or even in their minds of what they think they can or cannot achieve. And so it's honestly a privilege to be in this position. And it's not something that I ever aspired to do. It's actually something that I just worked and did what I can for kids, and the opportunities came along. And so my education, I spent my career as prior to working in education, I worked in law enforcement. I was a probation officer for a few years, several years actually. And during that time, I obtained my master's degree in counseling. I wanted to be a school counselor. And as a school counselor, where I started at Washington Union High School and West Fresno Middle School, my journey became one towards administration, where I became a learning director and assistant principal, director of student services, and now the position that I have as administrator of equity and student services. So the journey was progressive, and it had always been focused on providing equity and access for kids. And here I am today to be able to do it at a larger scale across our district. So just blessed and humbled to even have the opportunity to continue to serve Visalia Unified, where my students attend school, but also my own children attend school, but also as a member of the community. So super excited for that.
That is so awesome. Yeah, we wanted you on this podcast because we knew that you were a doer, and I loved hearing that part of your story. So our next question for you would be, what would you say your work is like on a daily basis at the district?
It's interesting, challenging to say the least. And not challenging for any negative reasons, challenging because with any form of change, it comes difficulty. But as you know, for those of you who are familiar with Frederick Douglass, he says, if there's no struggle, there is no progress. So the struggle is a part of the work, and I understand that. And I think where the challenge comes in is I want change to happen immediate. Right? I want it to be overnight. And as we know, and we see across our history in the country, right, change happens over time. And sometimes it happens as a result of the struggle. And so that is the part of my job that I relish and appreciate, because then I know change is coming. When there is struggle, there is progress that is coming along the journey. And so that's kind of the day-to-day. And it's really around getting a changing mindset, right? Changing the mindset of those who may be comfortable or familiar with things that they've always done. And that's understandable, right? It's difficult to change habits and ways and behaviors because you're used to something. But when that something is not necessarily the same thing that we should be doing because it's not producing the outcomes we want, then change is required of us. And that may be difficult. And so how do we get people to see the need to change, be willing to actually change, and then sustain the change for growth and positive outcomes for everyone? So that's kind of the day-to-day. I don't get as much of an opportunity to be around kids as I want to be. Coming from a site and being able to be around kids and laugh and joke and feel that energy of what it means to be on a campus is something that I miss. Obviously, with the pandemic, it's kind of restricted us from doing that, but that's the hope. Once we get back to school, I will be on campuses, rocking my J's, showing off my sneakers, engaging in conversation with kids, and really being able to be with the youth, because that's really where my heart is. And so, yeah, that's the day to day. I enjoy what I do, but it also comes with its challenges and struggles, but it's worth it.
Yeah, what a great response. I love that, like that message behind what you said, sort of like without a struggle, there's no change. And I think that's a really interesting concept too, because I think as students, there's a certain like image or visual we have in our head of what like working at the district looks like or what an administrator does in a day. And it's almost like feels stagnated, but of course the way you describe it is there's actually a lot of change constantly going on, not just like um, in your mindset, but also in the changes you're making in our district. So that's a great thing. And I guess going a little bit deeper into that, have you ever had a specific like aha moment in your work where you knew that your job was really making a difference in the district or in the community?
Yeah, they come in little waves. And I just recently had an aha moment. I'll tell you a couple stories, and this was the most recent one, but there's been many. Um, I had a student email me, and this was a young student, an elementary student, I believe around the second grade, and he wanted to talk to me, and his teacher, and he drafted up this email, and we had a conversation through email, and he wanted to meet me in person. And I said, okay, well, that would be great. That would be awesome. And I was super excited because it was a kid that I got to talk to. And that conversation was amazing because he seen a video that I had did somewhere, and he didn't know that there was a person that looked like him, a person of color, a Black man in the district office who was leading work across the district to create change for all kids. And he was intrigued by that. But he was also dealing with some personal things that he wanted to kind of flush out in his head. And he wanted to talk to me about that. So I had an opportunity to do that, and we had a great conversation. And of course, our conversation led into other things, his interests and things that he enjoys and what he wants to become and so on and so forth. But during that time, there was an activity that they were doing at their school, and they were doing a science project, and they were picking up rocks. And I had noticed that one of the students didn't have a rock. And I had reached out and I said, hey, buddy, did you find any rocks? And, he said, I couldn't find any. And so I had some. And so I gave him one of mine. And then I helped him find some other rocks, and then got other kids and joined in to help him find rocks. And at the end, he ended up having a lot of rocks. Well, that day was just a normal thing. We were just going about our day, and I didn't think anything of it. Well, last week, I find out that a parent shared that their child remembered me, and they had seen me somewhere, and they said, oh, that's Mr. Gridiron. And the parent actually knew who I was, and she's like, oh yeah, and I know Mr. Gridiron. And he said, how do you know Mr. Gridiron? And she said, well, how do you know Mr. Gridiron? He's like, well, Mr. Gridiron likes me. And she said, why? Well, because he helped me find rocks, and he helped other kids find rocks, and he gave me one of his. And although that story may not seem like there's change in the grand scheme of equity and access and opportunity, but that story is a reminder of that's how it starts. It's just that one thing. It could be a rock that creates a change in a kid's mind about how they feel about themselves or how others feel about them. But also to change the narrative and the stereotype that may come with what it means to be a Black man, what it means to be an educator, what it means to work in the district office, what they do, who they are, and having that opportunity to make that connection for that kid was a reminder of that's exactly what we're here to do, is to give hope and inspiration to one kid. And if we can do that and create that ripple effect where it's happening for every kid across our district, then we have an opportunity to make a change, and it happens through the youth. And a perfect example is what you all are doing, right? You created this podcast by the youth, for the youth, with the hope of inspiring other people. So that's just one example. I know it's a simple story, but it really touched my heart, and it reminded me that, to make change, it doesn't require a great deal of effort. It may be just something small.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. And I completely agree with you. I think it's the small little sparks that can make the biggest fires. And I love it so much. I've noticed that it's usually like the little things that stay with us the most because for some reason they just always stick by us. And I think that, especially with what you do, you have definitely been a game changer in our district with helping students one by one and in a group. And I think that that's just absolutely amazing. So thank you for that. Our next question for you is, how has working with VUSD affected your view of Visalia or Tulare County as a whole?
You know what? I've lived in Tulare County not all my life. So I've only lived here for, I believe, like 14, 15 years now. I'm originally from Fresno, which is a much different dynamic than Visalia. And what I've recognized and working in VUSD is it has its own community. Obviously, Visalia is its own community with a history, context, cultural dynamics, different things than Fresno. And what I've always tried to do is respond to the needs of the community and make sure that I'm responsive to that. And so this is, trends and patterns or changes across history rhyme. And what I mean by that is they rhyme with what preceded the current conditions and what is the current environment. And so what we have to do is think of historical context. Where we are, what may cause the community of Visalia to be slow in its shifts and change? Well, that's the uncertainty of what is to come. And so I have to be mindful and engage with the community to understand Visalia. What is important to the community of Visalia? What is important to us as a district, and make sure that I'm responsive to those needs. Visalia Unified is the largest district in Tulare County. I think it is necessary for us, and I don't think it is necessary. I know it is necessary for us to make the efforts that we have as a district be a community effort. In order for us to change or to create change that impacts everyone, it has to be all of us involved in the change. And I often reflect on this quote by Cesar Chavez is it says something along the lines, and forgive me if I get it wrong, but we cannot seek achievement for ourselves and fail to make progress or fail to seek progress and prosperity for our community, for our ambitions must be broad enough for our own and for others. And so it's this responsibility to the community, because honestly, our students, the 30,000 students that we serve in Visalia Unified School District, will one day serve this community. And we all have a responsibility to ensure that we help our students become what they're capable of becoming, so that way our community can become what it's capable of becoming. And so there's a lot of work to do. Obviously, mindset, again, like I said, is difficult to change. But I think we're making the right waves and we're moving in the right direction, because it all starts with dialogue, right? It starts with conversations like these podcasts, where we can get people in spaces to have conversations for the purposes of understanding, and then have common ground to actually work together to move the change forward. So we have a lot of work to do, but I love Visalia. I met my wife in Visalia. I have my children who go to school in Visalia. So Visalia has been great to me. It's given me so much more than I could have asked for. And it's where I started my career. So I will always call this home and do whatever I can to make Visalia the best community it can be, not only for my children, but for every student across our district and all the people in our community.
And that's so amazing. I think the sentiment, of course, like behind what you said, and like the importance of community, I think after speaking with you and other incredible community leaders, the importance of community has really come to the forefront, I guess, of everything that they do. And I think that's something that I didn't necessarily understand growing up, like that decision makers really depend on the community for everything they do. And I think in a lot of cases, sometimes leaders can forget that, but it goes back to the idea that you do have that responsibility, like you said, and the commitment to the community that you're serving. And I think that's such an important thing. So again, thank you. And so another question that I guess we have then is based on the, conversations that you've had in the community, the youth you've gotten to meet. Do you have any advice for anyone listening, especially youth, that you wish, or some advice that you wish you would have known when you were our age?
Oh man, yes. The advice that I give our youth is to continue to make your voice heard. Like never stop that, right? And it's not just your voice heard out to everyone. Like, yeah, you can share it with the world, but also what you tell yourself, what you consume. There's an internal voice that we have. We tell ourselves that we can or cannot do something. It causes us to believe whether we actually can do something, and it causes us to act in a certain way. I always tell kids this idea of what you think becomes how you feel, and how you feel becomes how you act. So if you think a certain thing about yourself, you may tell yourself that. And if you tell yourself that, you may actually believe it, and then you may act that way, right? And so there was this quote by Goethe. It says, treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them become what they're capable of becoming. And when I hear that quote, it reminds me so much about what I thought about myself and how I treated myself. And it wasn't until I began to shift the way I thought about myself and what I was capable of becoming. It wasn't until that moment I started to treat myself differently. I started to treat myself as if I deserved more, as I can do more, as I was smarter than what I thought I was, as I was capable of so much more. And then as a result, I started acting that way. And just to give you guys a little background about my path is that as a kid growing up, I struggled. I went to 11 different schools. I was raised by a teen mom. There were so many different traumas and experiences that I had in my life. I was in special education, all of these different things that these experiences that I had, but all of those experiences created opportunities for me to begin to see myself in a different light. And it honestly were the educators in my life, truly, the educators in my life who believed in me so much that I began to believe in myself. And they helped me find my voice. And once I did, I started telling myself different things. I started advocating for others in different ways, and opportunities became reality for me. When I think about equity and I think about access to opportunities, sometimes opportunities or access to opportunities are not realized because what we tell ourselves. And for a long time, there were doors that were open for me that I never seen as doors because I never believed that those opportunities were for me. I always thought, well, those are for the kids who are 4.0 kids, or those are for the kids who are in leadership, or those are for the kids who have two parents, or those are for the kids who aren't homeless or aren't in poverty or don't struggle in school. But the reality was that what it was is that I didn't believe that I could be one of those kids. And so it wasn't until I changed my perspective on life and I began to change that internal voice that was telling me all those negative things. It wasn't until I changed that my life began to change. So the advice that I give to kids is know that you can do and become anything that you put your mind to, as long as you believe it, as long as you think it, and as long as you're willing to put in the work. And so use your voice. Don't let anyone tell you can't do anything different. And the acronym that I would give to voice is it's valuing our individual commitment to equity. And so, yeah, make your voices heard and know that you always will have someone here at the district office who's going to champion for that and champion for you.
Wow, thank you so much for being vulnerable with us. That was an amazing story. I think too, like sometimes as kids, we think that the loudest voices are those that make the biggest difference. And I think that is that can be even further from the truth. And you yourself are an example of that. I think like with believing in yourself and putting in the hard work, you can honestly do anything. And with a strong mind, you can make the biggest change. So I encourage all the listeners to really just resonate with that statement. You do not have to have the loudest voice to make the biggest impact. You can always work at it. All right, Mr. Gridiron. And for our final question, we would like to ask you, if you had 1 minute in front of 1 million people to talk about your work or its importance or any general saying, what would you say?
Whew, that's a tough one. I would tell everyone to inspire our youth, because our youth is going to be our future. And as long as we continue to give back to others and continue to lead with love, we have an opportunity to create change. But also a reminder that we need to continue to fight and demand that what is expected for some should be expected for all. And until we achieve the level of what I would say equality across our country, and continue to pursue equity, then we should never continue or never stop fighting for what we need to do. And we have an opportunity to create change within our community, within our world, by just reminding ourselves of that. Every one of us has an impact, and our impact will be our legacy, and our impact that we leave on this world will be contingent on contingent on the things that we choose to do. So yeah, continue to inspire our youth, because the voices of today is the future for tomorrow. And so let's continue to create and inspire those around us. But yeah, and I probably would say a lot more than that, but that's what I can think of at the moment.
And that is an awesome message to leave us on, a beautiful call to action that everyone has an impact, and that, of course, youth should always remember the power of their voice. And with that, again, this was such a wonderful episode, Mr. Gridiron. Do you have any last words?
Well, I want to thank the both of you for being every part of what HEAL is all about. I want to thank the California Health Collaborative for creating this space for our kids and really inspiring. You all are setting the stage and the foundation. And I hope that one day that my kids will be able to continue to, follow in your footsteps, because you guys are truly, not to say, well, I probably shouldn't say trailblazers, but you guys are the pioneer. Oh, I shouldn't say pioneers either, right? You guys are giants. You guys are pioneers. You guys are trailblazers. You guys are any acronym that we want to use to say that you are setting the stage. You're blazing the path for the next generation. So continue to keep up the great work, and I appreciate it so much. You all give us hope and inspiration for our future. You inspire us. So thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much again, Mr. Gridiron. And with that, that's the end of this episode. If you would like to hear more from us and our amazing guests, just like Mr. Gridiron, make sure to follow us on the platform that you're listening to and visit @heal.project, and also visit @BUSD_equity on Instagram.
Thank you so much for listening, and make sure you guys tune in next week to find out more about how to heal. Bye everyone. Thank you. All right.